I sometimes think trying to become a good artist can be bad. As you might be aware, I have a subreddit called Nonsensical 2D, where you can upload your art and get feedback. So I'm currently working on a new feedback video, and I saw this post, where we have progress made over the course of 2 months. Here we have a before image, and then we have an after. And art-wise, I think this is great. So I checked out this channel, Alan the Voodoo, and I kind of fell down a rabbit hole. So here we have a video where he talks about learning character art. And once again, it's nice. There's one thing that stuck out to me. I got the sense that he wanted to become a good artist. Partly because he says it, but also because his banner says Ultra Learning. Now what's bad about becoming a good artist? It isn't necessarily bad. But I think that there's a small risk that you end up in trouble when you try to become a good artist instead of trying to make good art. Being a skilled craftsman, a skilled artist, is sometimes quite different from making good art. And so I think I've shown you this before. It's this thing, this painting. It's a big painting. So hopefully you agree it's not half bad. Now it's not a finished painting. I've been having it lying around for a really long time. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is that I knew how to paint paintings like that when I was around 18. But whenever I uploaded or showcased these, people were impressed, but they didn't like it. Not really. How do I know? Because I've also, at times, painted things like this. So you can see. It's stupid, right? And it's not impressive in any shape or form, right? This is not impressive. But when I uploaded it, it got the same amount of engagement. My portraits that took 50 hours got pretty much the same engagement as my 20-minute doodles in watercolor because I wanted to learn watercolor. One is impressive, one requires more skill, but it doesn't actually create interest. And we can actually look at another example, and it's this thing, One Punch Man. This artist, the original artist of One Punch Man, is fairly known for being a terrible artist. He lacks a lot of the fundamental skills, but I don't think he makes bad art. I think this is interesting. This appeals to people. And I actually think that sort of Attack on Titan, if you know that anime, the original artist of the manga is also not necessarily that skilled. You see a lot of artistic mistakes in it, but it's a really widespread anime. And it's in part really widespread because the Titans look so off-putting and so disturbing. And I feel on occasion as if the Titans are partly intentionally ugly and partly because the artist doesn't know how to make them nice looking. Still the same, they're good precisely because they're disturbing. And so when I made my mushroom character, I have an old video on it. I actually mentioned something because there's a small stage when making that character where the character is kind of proportional and looks kind of nice, but generic and boring. And I saw that and I went, okay, it can't look generic and boring. It can't look good. It needs to look kind of bad. So I changed the proportions and I made the eyes and mouth kind of goofy. And I did that for a very particular reason. I think that's often the problem that you see with bought assets. They're never bad. They're just boring. Many times they're actually better than my art. But yet people are often quite uninterested in it because there's nothing that actively engages you with it. It's just good. And I think good is dangerous. And just to land this point even further, because it doesn't only have to do with art. You know, when you went to school or perhaps in your workplace, you have these people that you actually can't remember the name of. You have seen them 100 times, you still don't know their name. And you kind of barely know their face. Those people generally don't have any special features going on. They don't dress in any strange way. They don't have glasses. They don't look bad. They don't necessarily look too extraordinarily good either. And you have like 4 or 5 of them that you see every day and you maybe mistake them with each other because they look fairly similar. And what you see with a lot of sort of beginner artists that get kind of good is that they're creating those type of characters. The characters that look so bog standard that you forget their name. And so you see with good artists is that they always push proportions. They always make it correct, but off. Or they're sort of triangular shaped or really tiny or they have really big heads. Anything that makes it engaging. It's not bog standard. Bog standard is boring. And what beginner artists often do is they focus on correctness, and correctness is almost always boring because we see it every day. Every person looks like a person, but not many people look like an odd person. But the odd person, even if they're ugly, even if they're pretty, the odd person you remember. And I think when we create a game or when we try to create any piece of art, we want the art to engage the person. You might be asking why I'm going on this rant based off of this small image that looks good. Well, it's partly because Alan the Voodoo is an ultra learner and wants to get better. And I just want to put in my 2 cents that it's important not only to learn how to become good, but also learn how to pull people's attention. But the second reason is this video he referenced. It's a good video, but I take issue with 2 things that is said in this video. It talks about the importance of movement, so that you can create this instead of this. Then it talks about the importance of proportions, so that you can create this instead of this. Specifically stating, it doesn't matter if you draw beautiful or detailed muscles, if the proportions are off or weird, the figure isn't going to look good. And I might have agreed if it wasn't for the fact that the thing he's showing is actually interesting. I don't agree that this is bad. Many times this is significantly better than this. It's not more correct, it's just more interesting. I think game art kind of needs to accomplish 4 things. The first 2 things are really easy to define. It needs to be consistent style-wise. And we can see Alan has nailed this. It also needs to have visual clarity. Once again, we have visual clarity here. But then we have 2 really tricky goals of game art. They're both tricky to describe and tricky to disentangle. It needs to be pleasant or okay to look at, and it also needs to be interesting. And as I said, these 2 goals are really tricky to talk about. They're tricky to teach and tricky to understand. Even the difference between pleasant and interesting is a strange distinction to make. I recognize that. But please bear with me. When I have talked about being good at the craft, picking nice colors, not having awful anatomy, it's generally this thing. We're just trying to make it kind of okay to look at. So to kind of showcase what I'm saying, I can pull up a random how to draw manga book, and if we look at a character like this, it's nice. The person can clearly draw, it's proportional. But you never see characters like this in games or any media. It's correct, it's good, it's okay, but it isn't interesting. If I instead pull up a book like this, Digital Art Masters Volume 3, any random page, and the character isn't just correct and pleasing to look at, it's interesting. And for characters like these, they're choosing to be incorrect in order to be more interesting. In my video on how to learn game art, I kind of call this skill meaning. The idea of creating meaningful art that resonates. It's kind of an art skill, but it's a weird and sort of nebulous skill. It's not about being correct, it's largely about being somewhat unpredictable in your choices. So like if I make a dog like this, it's fine, it's good. But there's some level where I would kind of prefer if the dog looks like this. This is stupid, but interesting. It's less correct. A dog should probably have more dog-like features, but it's still more interesting. So if we go back to these 2 tricky goals, making it pleasant and inoffensive to look at is important. But I think it's equally important when you learn to also focus on the interesting. Practice how to make something that resonates with people. You won't get credit for this skill, people don't understand it, but it's still important. Really regardless of what type of art we do. And I might be saying this because I'm biased, because I'm not a great artist. I'm like decent. But I'm also saying this based on experience in some regards. People don't care about portraits unless they're attached to a person they know or a celebrity. And so the only way to sort of earn money on portraits is to do commissions or just paint portraits of celebrities. And well, this garnered the same interest. This was both easy and bad. It's cute, but skill-wise it's kind of bad. But I think it's worthwhile when making your game to show something to someone else and not have them say, oh, you drew this looks awesome. But rather, oh, I really like this. Oh, this is cute. Because you generally don't want people to be impressed. Most of my art nowadays, I don't think people are necessarily impressed by it. But they do engage with it more. And I think that's a big difference. So keep on doing this. I think this looks good. I don't want to nitpick this. If you're asking me to nitpick, I think you're asking the wrong person. Most of my time spent on the channel is actively saying, be bad, you can still make something engaging. Just make sure to make it engaging. And so when you show me this, and it's good, I'm like, okay, be good, but also make it engage. You don't have to be a great artist. You just have to make great art. It's a small difference, but it's a meaningful one. Thanks for watching. Bye. One portion of making something interesting is about sort of having an implied backstory. So if we look at this dog, if this picture says 1,000 words, then I think this one kind of says 2,000 words. Because in this version, we're like, oh, it's a dog. What kind of dog? I don't know, it's just a dog. But when we have this, we sort of get this sense of the dog's personality. It's grumpy, maybe tired. And so we get this implied backstory. Even though we're showing one thing, we're sort of trying to hint at a lot of other things. And that makes it more exciting. And so with every choice that you get to make with your art, it's not just about representing whatever you're trying to represent, but using every opportunity that you have to tell a story about the world that you're creating. And so you might imagine now that we look at this dog, and this dog is correct, but the grumpy dog tells more of a story, but is more incorrect. Now you get an option. And this is where I feel like the idea of becoming a good artist can land you in trouble. You get an option to imply more about the world you're creating. You're getting an option to make something that engages a person. Oh, we get a grumpy dog. Or you can make something correct. And I feel often that a beginner artist is so preoccupied with making correct art that they make meaningless art. You should still seek to make the best art possible. Don't serve your own ego to be good as an artist. Serve the art piece that you're creating. And it's also more fun to create that way, to not just be stuck in your little box.